Hello and welcome to the Momentum Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Dallin Malm. This podcast features conversations with athletes, artists, and entrepreneurs who use their success and influence to serve a purpose greater than themselves. My guest today was born in a small town just outside of Logan, Utah. At age 15, he took his small life savings, he rode a bus to San Francisco, and he bought the cheapest seat he could find to hear a Wagner opera live. What he didn't know is 10 years later, he found himself back on that very same stage, but this time as the leading tenor. And over the next couple of decades, he performed with 26 different opera companies, with appearances that ranged from major American venues to invitations to be the soloist in places like the Vatican, the White House, Notre Dame, and other world-famous venues. But the twist is what he did with that career. You see, in 1987, in the middle of a solo performance on a world tour in Venezuela, he caught what would later be diagnosed as a sinus infection, but it quickly grew into a serious risk to his vital organs like his brain and his lungs. And after consulting 3 different doctors, they independently agreed that he should return home and get his affairs in order. Basically, he was dying. Well, he comes home to Utah and he experiences a miraculous recovery. It wakes him up to his greatest mission, which was saving the arts in his hometown. It didn't take him long to rally the support and funds to save a historic opera house in Logan and then build an opera company with a mission that goes beyond entertainment. That is to present art that elevates, educates, and edifies. As a result of his impact, hundreds of shows and dozens of Broadway performances have made their way to his small hometown. In our conversation, you'll hear us talk about the training arc that made it possible by starting with a historic doctorate degree he earned at Indiana University and transitioning to his New York years where it was expensive to rent practice rooms and 8-hour days studying and singing music were the norm. We'll talk about mastery under pressure, how he turned nerves into fuel, and what humility looks like at the highest level, whether it is earned or whether it is learned the hard way. And also why he has worked so hard to make world-class opera available for free to kids who would never otherwise see it. Please enjoy my conversation with my friend, Michael Ballam.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
You ask, what is our aim? Victory. Victory, however long and hard the road may be.
This will be remembered forever as the greatest day in the history of the Tour de France. You believe in miracles? Yes!
Unbelievable. The world is over-entertained. We don't need any more of that. We need enlightenment and we need edification. Those are the 3 E's that kind of drive the arts. But the most important one is that last one, to edify somebody, so that when they come in the theater and when they leave, they're a better person than when they came in. We want to change people's lives.
You said energize.
Well, the first one, entertain. For somebody in show business, it's to entertain people. But as I said, that's everywhere. We're constantly being entertained. And then to edify someone, to teach them something.
Yes.
But then to edify someone is to change their life.
Yes.
And that's what we have been striving to do now for 33 years with the opera company. I've never asked myself, I mean, I understand it now. If you're striving for something beyond yourself, there's power there. But I guess that was planted in a very difficult time of my life, junior high school. For some people, junior high school is wonderful. It wasn't so much for me. And I had a very historically mean teacher. Everyone was afraid of her. She taught at Wellsville Junior High and then South Cache High School, and then she ended up in the what was called junior high in that period in South Cache Junior High. Her name was Tilda Polson. She was feared by everyone, and she had a unique way of teaching. The first day of class, she said, "I want to be very clear about something. I'm not here to teach you anything. You are here to learn. I am a resource to help you do that. But if you're looking to me to just teach you the English language," she taught English, "no. And what I'm going to do is hold you responsible to be prepared. That's a life lesson that you need to learn, and why not learn it in the 8th grade?" And so when she would call roll, she didn't call the name and they'd say, "Here," it was prepared or unprepared. And somehow she knew if you were telling the truth or not. And it was over an assignment, say, from the night before, and she said, "I don't really care if you're here. I want to know if you're prepared or not." And because she caught a few, they would say, "Okay, I'm unprepared." Her first assignment was to learn Invictus, that epic poem that has a line that is just earth-shattering. And I wanted to be the first one up. We had to memorize it and then stand before the class, and I wanted to be the first one up. Not because I'm courageous. It's quite the opposite. I didn't want to be judged against anybody. I thought if I'm the first one out of the chute, I'm going to do fine. Plus, let's get the nerves over with.
Yeah.
And so I got up, and out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my inconquerable soul. And she stopped me and said, "What does that mean?" Well, I hadn't thought about that. She had told us to memorize it, not to understand it. I said, "Well, I guess it means that we have power over who we are, who we can become." "Okay, go on." It ends with, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." And she said, "Do you understand what that means?" "I think so." She said, "Let's talk about it, class. There are people, there are substances, there are activities that can rob you of your destiny." Ironically, she talked about alcohol because she owned the only saloon in town. But she said, "A glass of alcohol, it has no power at all. But once you consume it, it can have power over you. It can destroy your destiny if you let it. There will be people in your lives who have that capability. Your job is to not give it to them, to maintain the power of who you are going to become, who is at your core, and who do you want to become." And she proposed the idea that if we strove to do something bigger than ourselves, something noble, which she defined as it will bless other people more than it will bless you. If you do those sorts of things, you'll have special help from on high. If you're doing something for a selfish purpose, you're on your own. And many people do, and many people are very successful. But if you're looking outwardly and you're thinking about blessing others more than yourself, you'll have special power. I don't know that I spent my life doing that, but in a crossroads of my life, which was in 1987, when I was told I was dying, that'll get your attention. And my doctor in New York told me I had a matter of a few months that I should get my affairs in order. As you can see, he was wrong. Well, actually, I was dying. But in coming home, we found out what was wrong with me, and I was able to overcome it. But that changed everything. And as I was thinking it was the end, I discovered that the Capitol Theatre was about to be torn down. I loved that building. It had gone into terrible disrepair, but it was built as an opera house. It had 24 dressing rooms, and Mr. Thatcher, who built it, put on really grand opera. He loved Gilbert and Sullivan. He went to London every year to the Savoy to see the new Gilbert and Sullivan opera, and then he'd bring it here to Logan. And some of the operas, like The Pirates of Penzance, which we're doing this summer, played in Logan before it played in New York City.
Wow.
And it was amazing what he did. but it fell into disrepair. I remember performing there as a little boy when I was 5. It was in terrible shape at that point. And I looked around and thought, this is a glorious structure. Why isn't someone taking care of it? Well, the woman who inherited it was not interested in taking care of it. She was interested in selling tickets to movies, and there would come a time when you couldn't sell 1,500 seats to a movie. E.T. was the last movie that could sell 1,500 seats. And after that, it just was a downward spiral. And a big 1,500-seat auditorium was of no use, really. And so it was about to be torn down. And that didn't seem okay to me. And I went to see Eugene Needham and asked him, he had just purchased, and he didn't want it. He wanted the other real estate around it. He wanted to tear it down.
Turn it into a parking lot.
Precisely. And I convinced Gene, no, I think what you're going to do is you're going to give it away. And we're going to restore it. We're going to turn it back into being an opera company. And we're going to have, being an opera house. I didn't even think about the opera company because I didn't know that I had that much left in my life to do that. But I convinced him that he said, I'm dying. And I said, well, so am I, I'm told. Let's go out with a bang. Let's fix this to do what it originally did, which was something very noble, not just show movies. And I was able to convince him to do such. And then I thought, well, the consecration word comes up to me because my life was in peril. And I came to the point of determining that if God would preserve my life, I would no longer look to myself about what I was doing. I would look to him. And that changed everything. Because theretofore, when I would perform, I would more or less tell him, make sure my high notes are solid and secure, make sure I can have that long stamina to get through a 3-hour opera, make sure I remember the notes and so forth. And then I started thinking, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to say, what would you have me do? Thy will be done, not mine. And I really meant it. And all of a sudden, things started to change in my life. The university approached me for 1 year to be involved. It turned into 39. And I found fulfillment in helping young people grasp something they had never contemplated before, and to strive for excellence, which they'd never done before. They wanted to do well, they wanted to get A's, but I wanted to plant a seed that there's more than that. And you need to find out what God has in mind for you. It may be a very noble thing that you're supposed to do. And I felt that theater, I was supposed to save it. And once it was saved, I thought, well, what do you do with an empty opera house? You form an opera company, which I knew nothing about. I had sung with 27 opera companies at that point. I didn't know how to run an opera company, but I knew how not to run an opera company because I'd witnessed it many times.
It's just as valuable to know.
Yeah, it is. And as I was performing for the first 25 years of my career, I would look at the way they were operating and I'd think, there's a better way than that. But I never dreamed I would have the influence of formulating something like that. But the principal thing was that I wanted whatever we produced to be ennobling. And in our mission statement that we had to devise to get Uncle Sam to see us as a not-for-profit organization so we could accept donations, I wanted in that statement that we would lift people by making available ennobling art. And some of the people who were on the board said, people won't know what that word means. And I said, good. Let's make them look it up. It means to make something noble, something bigger than ourselves. In other words, we want to do work that will cause people to want to strive to be better people. And I think if we will do that, we'll have power from on high. We're going to have to expect miracles to make this happen. Because there's no reason on the earth that a town that at that point had 34,000 people to have an international opera festival. We bring people from all over the world, artists and patrons, in this little teeny town in Logan. We couldn't do that by ourselves.
Of course.
There's a power greater than we are to make that happen. And I said, we need to consecrate our gifts, our capabilities, that nothing will ever happen in this building that the Savior himself couldn't walk in and be comfortable. And that's not easy in the arts, particularly today, because the arts have become very crass. I just came back from New York and seeing some musicals that premiered in the 70s be rewritten to become very vulgar and crass because the producers feel like that's what the audience wants. I'm not sure that's what the audience wants. I think it came about for shock value, but I think we're past that. I hope we're past that. So we have experienced a number of miracles. The building should have burned down. It had a massive fire, actually 3 of them, but I think there was miraculous intervention. We were supposed to find things in the structure that we wouldn't have known existed. And it caused the city and our board of directors to galvanize our resources and say, well, are we really into this for the long run? Because fire can do one of 2 things. It can destroy or it can temper. You only make steel with fire. You have to burn off everything that's dross. Are we prepared to do that? Are we prepared not to just put superficial fixing of this theater, just get it up and running so we can put whatever show on? Or do we really want to start from scratch and make sure that everything we do is noble? That has been hard. But I know we've been blessed as a result of it. I know my life has been preserved with that being a part of it. I take it very, very seriously.
It would be good to color in some of the context here, because what you're saying is you essentially ended this phenomenal career over 25 years across 27 opera companies where you performed, sometimes as a soloist.
Always.
At the world's greatest.
Well,
Like, there's no question that they are among the greatest. They were the greatest. Were the Vatican, the White House, Notre Dame,
yeah.
the Kennedy Center.
A kid from River Heights, Utah,
Unbelievable.
singing for the Pope.
And taking that career and using the impact and momentum of that to bring something to Cache Valley, Utah. I was talking to you before this. I had a similar impression when I was in London earlier last year. We would spend the evenings at the West End Theatre, and it's impossible to hear those performances of how those singers can project their voice and create such a beautiful sound. 7 or 8 people all at the same time in perfect harmony, and not feel, my goodness, the people in Cache Valley have to hear this. And that's what you've done.
It's transcendent when you hear things like that.
I love that word.
It takes people working at the highest level. Then you transcend just normal humanity. You go someplace exaltant. And if people experience that, they'll want more of it. A real awakening for me was, how many years ago? About 28 years ago, I got a phone call from Larry H. Miller. Probably at that period of time, the most famous man in Utah. He owned the Jazz, and he had just built the Delta Center. And he said, I need to come and talk to you. And I said, why me? He said, I'm supposed to help you with something, and I have no idea what you do.
Completely out of the blue.
Out of the blue. He had seen me perform in Provo in a recital, and his wife said, there's something beyond just his standing there and singing It's what he's talking about that is important. So Larry came to Logan, and I took him into the Ellen Eccles Theatre, and I explained to him what I saw the potential could be to create a world-class opera company that also did musical theater and operetta, but with the very best of everything. And he said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Well, we've got some challenges right now," and I articulated 3 of them. And over time, Larry fixed every single one of them. But the first year I said, "You really need to come and see an opera." He said, "Oh, I've never seen an opera." I said, "Believe me, you'll love it." "Do I have to wear a tie?" "I only wear ties 1 day a week on Sunday." And I said, "No, you don't have to wear a tie. Not in Logan. It's a summer festival, and we want people coming and being comfortable. If they want to wear a tuxedo and rhinestones, great. If they want to come in shorts, golf clothes, that's great. We just want them to come." And he said, "Okay." I said, "In fact, I'll give you the shirt," because I knew he loved polo shirts. I always wore the same kind of polo shirt. And I got one that had the opera company's logo on it. And I put him in a very special seat to see Madame Butterfly. I thought, that's a good one to start with. And I stood in the back, as I often do, and watched, and I noticed he didn't move a muscle. And I thought, oh no, he's fallen asleep. And then intermission came, and he and Gail just sat there. That made me even more nervous that he had really fallen asleep. And I went down, and I saw that he was weeping. His polo shirt had 2 wet spots from the tears coming off his cheek, because Larry was unabashed about showing emotion. And I said, "Larry, what's happening? This is the happy act." He said, "Oh, I don't know what's going on. They're singing in Spanish or something." And I said, "Well, yeah, but over the proscenium, all the words are there." He said, "Oh, I never looked up." And I said, "Then why are you weeping?" And then he really choked up, and he said, "The excellence. Every kid in the state of Utah should see this excellence, because it takes everybody, doesn't it?" He said, when that soprano sings a high note, it's a 3-pointer. "But who painted that set?" I said, "Well, he's from Florence, Italy. He's an artist." "Who designed it?" "Well, he's from New York City." "Who have you got down there in the orchestra? Who's that big string instrument?" "He's from the Tel Aviv Orchestra. He's from the New York Philharmonic." He said, "So it's the best of the best. It's everybody at their peak, right? They're the very best." And I said, "Yes, they are. Every kid needs to see this, because you see, how many people does it take to put on this show?" And I said, "About 300. And he said, "And there's a place for everybody, isn't there?" And I said, "Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about it. We can all bring what we have to give together, and the sum is greater than all the parts." And he said, "I need to help you so that you will be able to let every kid." And now we can. Larry's gone, but his influence made it possible for us to invite any child from kindergarten to the 12th grade to come and experience it. He said, "The wonderful thing about what you're doing here is that everybody can contribute." He said, "With the jazz, we got 2 mega stars, John Stockton and Carl Malone. Not everybody can be John Stockton and Carl Malone. But you've got something for everyone here. Kid who's good with mechanics, somebody who built that set, really knows what they're doing. And young people need to see what can happen when everybody comes together. Those are real heroes, and not everybody can just be Carl and John. They need to see that it takes everybody." And that got me through, because it was hard that first season. I thought, why am I doing that? My health, we found out what was wrong with me. I had surgery, and things started to turn around. So much so that I could go back to do what I was doing, which was singing title roles in big houses all over the world. I loved that. I loved the applause, but I made the mistake of standing backstage for a performance of La Bohème by Puccini. And their children in Act Two of Bohème, they had learned Italian. These were all local children. They had learned Italian, and they were running around singing music that was 150 years old and singing it flawlessly. And I thought, if I weren't here, these children would never know that this exists. Even if it's only 25 children, it was worth that. And I thought, I'll try one more year. And 32 years later, I'm still doing it. And it isn't any easier. In fact, it's harder than it once was, because the world is changing. The world has become crass and vulgar and less generous about giving money to those enterprises. But we need it more now than ever. We need a place where people come where they're safe to experience emotional response and not be judged by it. You turn off the lights, they're safe to laugh and cry and be among other people doing the same thing. Television's wonderful, but you share it alone, or you maybe have 2 or 3 people with you. In an opera house that seats 3,000 people, and they're all weeping at the same moment, or they're all clapping at the same moment, it's bigger than any one person can do by themselves, and that is really important. We've got to keep that going. It's hard, and Cache Valley is a very small space to be doing such a big thing. Now, I don't know who recognizes that. You do. There are a lot of people who, after 32 years, don't even know we exist and could care less.
Sure.
Once they come inside, once they experience that kind of transcendent excellence, they'll want to find that again and again and again.
Something about the arts feels very approachable and doable.
It should.
When you hear a singer, there's definitely a point where you look at a great painting, you hear a great performer, and you can respect that they are levels and levels and levels above you, and I'll never be able to do that. But people still sing, and people still create, and they draw, and they build. And there's that dimension that you talked about where it fills this piece of us that we need. There is man and woman were created to be creators themselves.
That's right.
And the arts are, in a way, don't you love how most of the greatest music out there is not in the English language?
Yes.
But it's been celebrated for centuries, and it has power to it. So when we talk about excellence and when we talk about mastery, a lot of people are curious to know what that looks like in different realms. A lot of the principles are the same. There is a dimension of work ethic and devotion and sacrifice and passion and courage, but they take different form across different masters. You went to Indiana University. You were the youngest to get your doctorate.
Which shows you can fool some of the people some of the time.
So you're 24 years old, and now you're pursuing this professionally. When you were now at a doctorate level of education, and this was now your singular focus in life, can you walk me through what obtaining mastery looked like on a day-to-day? What did you have to do? Can you walk me through maybe an average day and the standards you set for yourself?
Sure. I had never seen an opera as a kid. When I was about 5 years old, I saw Hansel and Gretel, which the university put on, and I was fascinated by telling a story by doing nothing but singing. That fascinated me. I saw Them All in the Night Visitors on television. They told the whole story by singing. I found that really fascinating. I fell in love with musical theater when I was that age, too. Brigadoon was my first musical that I saw, and I was just astonished by it. And then Oklahoma and Carousel, and they started getting bigger and bigger, but I'd never seen an opera. So at the age of 15, I took my life savings of $60 and got on a Trailway bus by myself, 1967, and I went to San Francisco by myself. And I had a ticket to Wagner's longest opera, Tristan and Isolde. Got the cheapest seat in the house, which was $8 out of that 60 that I had. And I got there early, and I saw this glorious building. I'd never seen anything like that. And looked down in the orchestra pit, and I'd never seen so many instruments. There were 100 instruments down there. How are they going to fill all these seats? Well, they did. And then the lights went out, and I heard a tenor voice come singing through the darkness. And I'd never heard a voice of that majesty, non-amplified, no microphone, just filling that cavernous space. I didn't know what he was singing. I got a sense of what he was singing. It was something important. And even though the first act is over 2.5 hours long, it just went like nothing. And the lady next to me, I said, I'm going to do that someday. And she patted me on the knee and she said, well, that's nice, dear. 10 years later, I was that tenor voice on that stage, on that same set.
In San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow.
To get from River Heights, Utah, which is where I lived when I saw that opera, to the War Memorial Opera House singing Wagner was a big trek. I knew that I needed to gain the knowledge because growing up in this small community, I was at a disadvantage. I had colleagues that grew up in New York City. Their grandparents took them to the Met on Saturday afternoons. I didn't have any of that experience. So I wanted to go to the most difficult, highly respected institution in the world. And in those days, it was Indiana University, the toughest spot you could ever go. They will probably graduate 15% of the people who started. I was the 7th recipient of a Doctor of Music in Opera out of 1,000 candidates. Because I was going to get it. Not because I wanted to be Dr. Ballam. The title meant nothing to me. I wanted the information. I wanted to have enough information that when I walked out to audition in New York City, I had the confidence, I deserve to be here. I've put in the work. I practiced maybe 4 hours a day and then studied well into the night, did 9 major roles in 4 years at the school, which was, nobody had ever done that. But I just was driven to do it and to gain as much information as I could. Then I got out of there, moved to New York City, and began to audition for everybody. And fortunately, they liked me. And I was a tenor. If I were a lyric soprano, I would have starved to death. But practicing was the most important thing to me. I needed to practice. Now, our rent was $300 a month, which was about all we could come up with. To practice was $3 an hour at the Ansonia Hotel across from where we lived. I practiced 8 hours a day for many years. I didn't sing 8 hours a day. I probably sang 2 hours a day, but I played the piano and learned the roles in my head so I wouldn't wear out my voice. Opera is hard. It takes a great deal of strength and fortitude and stamina. You can wear yourself out. I wanted to practice 8 hours a day, but at $3 an hour, that was $24 a day, and rent was $300 a month. So we're talking about in a week's time, I was paying half a month's rent. Mm-hmm. It was, what am I going to do? But there was a girl who had grown up in Logan by the name of Peggy Tueller. She left when she was 20 years old, moved straight to New York, and began to work in the arts. And her uncle was my voice teacher here in Logan, Eugene Tueller, and he warned her when I was 14, this kid is going to make it. And he's going to come knocking on your door, and I want you to help him. So the first night we arrived, Peggy came with a friend of hers that lived in the same building, and she said, "Are you practicing?" And I said, 8 hours a day. Where? Well, the Ansonia, but it's more than I can afford. And she looked to her friend, and her friend opened her purse and gave me the keys to her apartment. She said, "I have a grand piano. I leave in the morning at 6 a.m. I come home at 10 p.m. It's yours."
Wow.
Providence smiling on me. And I worked my tail off. I didn't take a job. I didn't wait tables. I didn't do anything. My wife had a job. She taught school there. And I thought, if I can just give it a year of focusing just entirely on building the skills.
Help me understand, what skills were you building?
Well, physical skills. Singing opera is like athletic prowess. I watched the Olympics last night, and I just stand in awe. They will always thrill us because they do something beyond what normal people can do. And opera is about that. You hear someone sing that high C and hang on, and being heard over 100-piece orchestra with no amplification. Not everybody can do that. I think opera will always live as long as there's that superhuman capability. So part of it was physiological. 4 hours a day of just building the muscles and making sure every day they were at the top. The next thing was learning the music and learning the history of things. And if I knew that someone was going to put on Madame Butterfly, I'd learn the arias so that when auditions were held, I could show them what I did. And then once I started getting jobs, they discovered that I could learn new music rather quickly. And so I would be given premiere works. Stephen Sondheim handed me, Sweeney Todd handed me the manuscript of Joanna and had me read it for him. That required work every day of constantly working harder and striving more. So a day was just work, 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 work. And then I would go to the Met at night and stand, because Peggy had a standing room pass, and I'd stand through a 3-hour opera and just adore every moment of it. I was constantly going and watching and seeing and finding out everything I could and studying the great artists from the past. What did they sing? When were they singing it? How old were they when they sang those roles? And I began to see there was a pattern of success. It wasn't accidental. There was a certain pattern that made a Caruso or a Pavarotti. And
Can you speak more to that?
Yeah. I noticed that most of them made a significant debut by the time they were 26. What I mean by that significant, they sang a major role in a major company by the time they were 26. When I went in to interview to go on a mission, which I had planned to do all of my life, the bishop said, "I've been having an unusual feeling about this. I feel like your mission is going to be later in life, that you're supposed to prepare to be in big exposure. When do you really have to make it as an opera singer?" And I said, "Well, according to the research I've done, if you don't make a major debut by 26, you're not likely to really be able to succeed. It's like baseball pitchers. They're young.
Yes.
They can only throw for a certain amount." And I found that all of the opera singers who really succeeded, they got in there early. And he said, "You need to do that. You don't have time to spend 2 years right now. You've got to put those 2 years, and you'll be on a mission later in your life," which he was right about that. I'm on a mission right now. I was called by Gordon B. Hinckley as a music missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
They literally created that position, that assignment, if you will.
And I said to President Hinckley, "How long is this calling going to be in effect?" And he said, "You ever heard of Jacob Hamlin?" lifetime calling. And he said, what I want you to do is to teach the gospel through music and be someone that can be looked to as an example that, yes, you can do it. You can hold to the line, you can hold to the rod and still become a famous opera singer. We need you to do that. And so I got married when I was 20, and that was crucial.
Before you moved out to Indiana?
The week before.
All right.
The week before. And she was my salvation. She was the rock that kept me going. And then after those 4 years in Indiana, I went to New York City, and I wanted to live in the heart of New York City, and I wanted to see everything and experience everything, and it worked. I told my agent that I didn't want him to tell me the fee until after I had decided yes or no. He said, "You're crazy. You'll starve to death." And I said, I don't think so, because money oftentimes has made me make mistakes. And I don't want you to tell me a fee that might cause me to accept something that's going to be bad for me. I want to decide, who am I going to be performing with? Are they better than I am so I can grow? Is it a good conductor? Is it a great director? Is it the right time for me to be singing that role? And then I'll make the decision, and then you can tell me what the fee is. He said, "Never heard anything like it. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. You're going to starve to death." And I said, "No, I think it's all going to work out. If I make the right decisions, it'll all work out." And of course, I involved deity in that. But at that point in time, I more or less told him. I would send an order heavenward and say, I really need to get that job with the San Francisco Opera. Please help me do that. And it was always, I wasn't asking him, what would you have me do? That would change when I was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think had I not come to that brick wall, that may never have happened. I would have continued praying constantly, but always telling the Lord what I wanted him to do for me. And all of a sudden I realized that takes you so far. There's a ceiling to that. If you're really going to break through that, you've got to say, "Thy will be done. What would thou hast me do?"
And it's great to know that you were, at the time in your life, it's fair to say that you were compelled to have that mindset. You weren't necessarily forced, but you were put in a position where you recognized, my life is now, I am powerless to keep myself alive here. There's divine intervention. But that had been built on a foundation of success, of the incredible development of your skill. You tie together these insane amount of hours, and an uncommonly great person does uncommonly great things when nobody is watching, and that includes the preparation. 8 hours a day. I'm singing as much as is wise. If I'm not singing, I'm listening and I'm playing and I'm studying and I'm memorizing and I'm watching greats. I'm being influenced by the greats. You combine that still with the desire to, money will come as a result of a great performance, but I cannot perform at that level if I'm not around people who are living that, exemplifying that. So at a young age, you must have connected with people. Do you remember the first big name that you felt like you were developing a relationship with, maybe a mentorship under, or a great singer or director that took you under their wing and gave you your first big shot? Can you tell me about that?
My voice teacher, who had sung with the New York City Opera, she was glorious, and she believed in me. She had a full studio. She didn't have time to teach me.
This is in New York.
In Bloomington, Indiana.
Got it.
And I sang for her, and she said, "Well, I really don't have a space, but I'm going to take you anyway." And she said, "Not so much because of what's in your throat, but what's in your eyes. You want to learn. You want to do it, don't you?" And I said, "I do."
Enthusiasm is contagious.
It is, and she saw it, and she knew how dedicated I would be, and she would come to rehearsals, and she'd give me a list of 100 things she wanted me to improve for the next rehearsal, and I would take it, and no matter how negative she would be, I knew she was doing it because she loved me and she wanted me to improve. So I was always grateful for the criticism. And I was the contemporary of 2 other Mormons of high visibility, one of whom I saw 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas, Donnie Osmond, and Peter Vidmar, who was an Olympic athlete. We were the same ages, and they were doing something entirely differently than I was doing it, but I could sense that's the way I want to do it. I would stand in the wings at the Kennedy Center when I was singing an opera in the Opera House, and Donnie was singing in a musical in the Eisenhower. The backstage is connected, and when I wasn't on the stage, I'd be watching Donnie out there, and I'd watch him when he couldn't see me interfacing with the director, and I thought, there's something special about him. It's not just the talent, it's who he is inside. And Peter was the same. There was just something remarkable about those gentlemen. And my first job, I was hired by Hal Prince, the man. Had it not been for Hal Prince, there would have been no West Side Story, Fiddler on the Roof, Phantom of the Opera. He was the god of musical theater, far above anyone. And he hired me as a kid, as a 25-year-old kid. And I hung on everything he said.
1 year post-graduation. That is gold.
It was, I think it was Providence. It was Providence. And that's the following year, I met Luciano Pavarotti and Placido Domingo and Beverly Sills, and they were icons, but I wanted to watch. Why are they icons? Why is Birgit Nilsson the greatest Wagnerian singer of all time? I held her on the stage as she sang into my face. I could see it was more than just her talent. There was some essence about Birgit that she was striving for the very best, and she worked every day. She said to me, if I go without practicing 3 days, my audience knows. If I go 2 days, my agent knows. I go 1 day, I know. I have to stay on the top all the time. That's stressful, being an opera singer. You're only as good as your last performance, and you have to maintain that. I mean, she was the heavyweight champion of the world, as opera singing goes, and she always had to be at that level. That's really hard. The stress level is immense.
Does it carry through in the opera industry, where there's that common pattern when somebody becomes great, it strongly correlates with laziness that precedes the fall of their career, or they get comfortable and they settle into a place beneath their privilege? I imagine that's the same across, even into opera.
Yeah, it happens earlier on when people are doing well and they think, gee, I'm singing at the New York City Opera, and I'll just coast the rest of my life. That wasn't Birgit Nilsson or Beverly Sills or Luciano Pavarotti or Placido Domingo. They were always striving more and more. And Domingo was auditioning every year. The man was a superstar, but he was still wanting Mr. Adler to hear what he'd been working on, and he was striving to do even more and more. The really great ones are like that, and the really great ones are humble. They're not prima donnas. They're secure about themselves, and they're not jealous of anybody else, because I've got enough to worry about me. I'm not going to worry about other sopranos or other tenors.
Yeah.
They're just very special, and I was surrounded by people like that. And I emulated them, and I wanted to see what were their lives like.
That's one thing that I've taken in the study of really great people is they treat everything like it's the first time, where it all depends on this. I read recently about Rick Rubin, the famous producer. He would give counsel to up-and-coming music producers that you should treat every album like it's your first album and it has to become a hit to get you on board. And that is the same mentality that a great fighter will do when they go to their fight camp. Never changes. They still leave their phone away. They still diet very strictly. They still work out very intensely as if it was their first fight that they had to win. And you can tell the difference in my mind, and I think you would agree, there is a level of that, but there is a degree bigger than that. And yes, you can always scale up the intensity, and some people have the ability, their voice, for example, can just go longer. They just have this stamina to them that's unnatural. But the really great ones that distinguish themselves, they take that principle and they apply it not only to their work ethic and their preparation, but to the way that they treat people. You mentioned that he was so humble. And when you take somebody who they believe that they have earned this because of what they've done and how they prepare, and yet they treat people lesser than them, that in my mind is that differentiator, where even to the smallest fan or to the person who they don't know from Adam, to treat them with that genuine respect, I think that separates the good from the great, but it also distinguishes the purpose behind the work. To take it back to your junior high teacher, yes, she set the expectation good, which I love how she said things can have power over you if you allow it. And as your career went up, I don't imagine you struggled much with some of the vices that many of the others probably did, probably because of your upbringing in the church, but also you were just taught good things from a young age. And she has you memorize Invictus. And I remember reading how she, at the very end, when you said, she had you repeat the last two lines, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." And she said, "Stop, say that again." And you repeated it. And she said, "Say that again." And again and again. She said, "Well, say it like you mean it, Michael. Do you actually believe it?" And I think you said at the last time you said it, you were shouting it. They could hear you across the school. But
you are good, Dallin. You have quite a memory.
Well, it's what's fascinating about that, Michael, is the foundation was laid. You talk about providence. These are things that you could not control, but they were put in your life. Yes. And I love how you can see this interwoven into your story, where you come with the passion. I am the captain of my soul. You are grounded in good and true principles, and you have eyes to see depth of character, real mastery in the subject, and this uncommon desire to put in a tremendous amount of work into something. It's uncommon, especially amongst 20-year-olds, to commit themselves to that and to not ask about the fee for the agent and just put me in front of the best people. Like, you've observed so much talent, you know how unnatural that is. But look where it led you. A soloist in the White House, for crying out loud. So my next question is, in addition to those things we've talked about, what else in your mind separates the great from the greatest?
That humility factor of, even when it's really, really wonderful, I can do better. Next time, I can take it even further. Hal Prince was the perfect example of that. When he was 19, he bought a book called 7.5 Cents, the story of the unions in the garment district, and he thought, this would make a good musical. He was 19, and he went to see the most important composer of the time, Frank Lesser, who wrote Guys and Dolls, and he said, would you write some music for this? And Frank said, I'm working on something else, but there's these two young guys out on Long Island. I think they would do it. And so he went to see them, and they said, sure, love a chance. He produced it all by himself in New York City, and it was a hit. And then the next year, he bought another book called The Yankees Take the Pennant. And that became Damn Yankees. The other one became Pajama Game. And that launched him into thinking, I can do this. And little by little, he always wanted to work with the best of people, George Abbott, who was the icon at that time, he went to see him and he said, "I'd like you to hire me." And Abbott said, "I have no positions." He said, "You won't have to pay me. I'll work for you for a year, and if you think I'm worth keeping, that'd be great if you hire me, but I just want to work for you for nothing." He wasn't a rich kid. He just wanted to grow. He wanted to watch the best work. And Abbott said, "Okay, take out the garbage." And he worked his way up to being Abbott's assistant within a year. And then when the year came, Abbott said, "I'm going to hire you as my assistant." And Hal said, I think I'm going to go on my own. I think I can do this too." And that's when he started producing those musicals, and all the way up to going to see Andrew Lloyd Webber and saying, "I think The Phantom of the Opera is a good story. I think you could make a musical out of it."
Wow.
And he lived to be 96. I was with him 2 weeks before he died. I watched him. He was always humble, always. Confident. He had strong confidence. He knew what he did well, but he was still very humble. I can do better. There's still something else I can do.
So that can still get pushed too far, where people drive themselves to insanity or extreme neglect of other important parts of their life. There's this great analogy that I just learned from a good friend of mine where we're all familiar with juggling the demands of life, similar, just a juggler keeping the balls in the air. And it's, there's some times where you have to keep it in your hand and there's other times where you have to toss it up. But he added a new dimension to this that I'd never considered that I think is really helpful. He said, as you're juggling these balls, you need to pay close attention at which balls are glass and which balls are rubber, because you're juggling both. And there's some balls that you can afford to drop, and they're rubber, and they'll bounce back up, and you can put them right back into the rotation, and it's okay that you dropped that ball. There's balls that are made of glass, and if you drop those, there's serious consequences to it.
Wow.
And at different times in your life, those rubber balls can turn to glass, and those glass balls can turn to rubber. And your job while you're juggling is to earn the discernment to see which is what.
Wow.
He said, for example, nobody can build a highly successful career without taxing their family. If they're a family person, they're married, and especially if they have children, the family is bought into the career. Yeah. In the performing world, I'm sure that's more so than most others. Similar to a pro athlete, Daddy works, Daddy travels half the year, and that's what we do. My dad was an artist, and so it was a little bit different, but there's still sacrifice involved. And there's balls where sometimes if you drop the family ball, it's okay. But there's plenty of times where if you drop that glass ball, it's devastating.
It's gone.
So when you take somebody who has that mindset and that hunger, more, I can do better, I can do better, I can do better. They're juggling these balls. There is a tendency more often than not to drop the glass ball of family, of moral value, and of other important parts of life where you see it's glass because it's all over the media and it's a huge, terribly sad thing and lives and careers are ruined. What advice would you give to somebody who has that passion and that fire to naturally say, I know I can do better, I know I can do better, but to caution them against going too far? Does that make sense?
Yes. I've seen both. Hal always brought his family along with him. Others who I watched their lives disintegrate abandoned their families, abandoned their moral integrity. I had made the decisions about drugs, alcohol, all of that. I had made that decision as a teenager. So when I was offered a drink at a cast party, it was a no-brainer. I'd already made that decision.
Well, can I interject something real quick?
Yeah.
I love that principle. I learned this from a wrestler who set his mind at winning a national championship. And he said, when you know what you want, the decisions are already made for you. Right. And in your case, that's exactly what it was. Right. I knew what I wanted. And so saying no to alcohol, that was a decision I made years ago.
Yeah. And I got nothing but respect for it. I was never ridiculed. I was never razzed about it. In fact, I was on a cruise ship once with Roberta Peters. I had just sung a recital, and she was the most famous opera singer alive at that point in time. and she had a champagne reception for me. And when they came to me, I said, "Do you have orange juice?" And Roberta noticed it, and she stopped the whole proceeding, and she said, "I shouldn't have served champagne. Michael doesn't drink champagne, and really we all shouldn't be drinking champagne. He's drinking orange juice. Do you have enough orange juice to serve everyone?" And everyone set their champagne glasses on the table and drank orange juice.
Wow.
I wasn't ridiculed. I didn't hide from that fact. I toasted with orange juice. And and Roberta saw it and thought, let's recognize him for that. Let's not ridicule him for that. Now, there was a time I was on the road for 10 months of the year. My children didn't see me. One particular night at the Kennedy Center, I had a really remarkable ovation. I left the theater exultant, even being afraid to go out in the public. Of course, it wasn't really for me as Michael Ballam. It was just things happened to work that night. And I went home and the phone rang and Laurie said, "I think you need to talk to Vanessa." Vanessa was 5 years old. And she said, she needs to hear your voice. She's been crying a lot. And I said, "Really? Why?" She's been watching live from Lincoln Center. She just watched Traviata by Verdi, and I think she needs to tell you about it. So she came on the phone, and she was whimpering. And I said, "What have you been doing?" I watched an opera. "What's it called? What was it called?" "I Love Traviata." I think she got "I Love Lucy" and La Traviata mixed up. And I said, "Well, tell me about it." She said, "It's about a little girl whose dad is gone all the time. And she tells him that if he keeps going away, she will die. And he stays away, and she is dying. He finally comes back, but it's too late. And she dies. And everybody tears up their programs and throws them from the balcony." That isn't the story of La Traviata. But that was her view of it, and I thought, whoa. So from that point forward, I determined I would take one child with me every time I went on the road. Usually that was 5 weeks. Most opera engagements are 5 weeks.
Wow.
3.5 weeks of rehearsals and a week and a half of performances. I didn't take them with coloring books and all that. I took Vanessa first when she was 6 years old. She came to every rehearsal. She sat there. I wanted them to see that what I did was hard work.
Sure.
Because all they ever saw was opening night parties, and I didn't want them to think, Daddy leaves us so he can have these parties. She sat through all those long, tedious, difficult rehearsals, as did every one of my children. And then they understood what I was doing out there was hard. None of them chose to make that their life, except Vanessa. The rest of them, but they all understood it was not easy to take a child with me. And to get the director, conductor to be okay, I'm bringing this 5-year-old child in. She's going to be okay. There were no Game Boys or that sort of thing in those days. And I didn't give them anything to distract them. I wanted them to watch and see it all happen. And it was remarkable. Teachers were usually very happy to let them go based on the fact that I said, they're going to learn something while they're there. I'm going to Philadelphia. We'll go see all the important spots. I'm going to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
They'll see a lot. But I never felt like you should ever let school get in the way of their education. And if I could show them the world in 5 weeks, that was more important than learning the capital of Rhode Island. It worked for my children, but it was very hard work to make that happen.
Would you say that it saved?
It saved our marriage. It saved my family.
Yeah.
My children were never neglected.
So when you're talking about pushing things too far, I can do better, and losing yourself in the work, one thing that worked good for you was, I still have big commitments, but I can work my children in. They can still be with me. I've heard of other people doing it. There's the CFO of, I want to say, Citibank, where he talked about this. He said, I have a job that literally people would kill me to have my job. And he says, and I mean that literally. So there's immense pressure on me to always perform well. For me to perform well, I have to be at the office, and I have to have a presence, and I have to be on my A game always. Lots of pressure, big reward, big sacrifice, but none bigger than what my family had to give. He said, so how do I see my kids? Well, I have to work them into my schedule. My wife will bring them to the office for 3 or 4 hours a day, and they will do their homework in my office. We'll talk, we'll play, we'll have dinner together, but I have to work them in. And yes, I take phone calls, I have meetings in between, but that's my family time. And when I think about my life, and I think people generally, that sounds very unappealing generally, but there are situations where the principle is the same. You have to find a way to make this work. And like you said earlier, if you don't have the support and complete just buy-in of your wife and your children, it's not possible.
No.
There's no way it's possible.
No, my children are down the entire summer. They're working with the opera company. They're either on stage, or they're working backstage, or they're doing something because I need to see them. And I go at 7 a.m. I come home at 10 at night. The only way I'm going to see them is if they are in the show that I'm in, or if they're helping me with work that needs to be done there. Every one of them grew up in that opera company. It was crucial. As we've had this conversation, I thought, I don't know of anybody else that I ever worked with that brought their children.
Yeah.
Some of them would bring them with a nanny, and they would be away, but I don't recall ever anyone bringing them to rehearsals.
Yeah.
And having them sit there and watch.
Well, kudos to your kid for having the patience to do that.
They didn't know anything else.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. There was a show that came out this last year called Landman. I haven't seen it, but there's a clip from it that's really famous with Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. He's cast in the TV show as himself, Jerry Jones. He made his money in oil, and he bought the Dallas Cowboys. And he talks about, there's a clip that's really famous where he's sitting by somebody's hospital bed, and he says, "You want to know why I bought the Dallas Cowboys?" He said, "I wanted so badly to build something and to be with my children, and so I bought the Cowboys so that they could all work for the Cowboys, and by extension work with me, and we could be together as a family. That's why I'm doing this." And it's a heartfelt thing, and it got really famous and viral because Jerry Jones is not an actor, but he delivered a flawless performance, and it's because he meant what he said. Those were not scripted lines. Those were like written on his heart. So let me switch gears and ask you this. When you finally get your shot, when you finally get your moment, you can think back to your first major performance and your last major performance. Huge difference, lots of growth, lots we could talk about there. But a common theme is the nerves when you're stepping out on stage. How did you handle your nerves in your first big performance to calm down and do your best compared to how you would do it now or how you would coach someone to do it now?
Interesting. My very first major performance was singing the role of Hoffman in the 5-act opera, The Tales of Hoffman. He's on stage the entire night. Everybody else comes and goes, but he's there the entire night. And I wasn't well, and my home teacher gave me a blessing. And I went from being so laryngitic I couldn't talk to singing the opera. And I didn't have time to be nervous. I had to think about the technique to be able to negotiate the pitches, the staging, all of that. I'm told that the scenery broke apart in the performance and that I just straddled it and then stepped over. And I don't remember that happening. The people in the production remember it happening to this day, but I was so concentrated that there weren't really nerves. There were until I set foot on the stage. Then I had too much to think about.
You threw yourself right in.
I was so focused, like I watched the Olympiads. I know, I can see they're just so focused. However, there was a time when I was singing Hoffman again 20 years later, and I was so frightened because my voice wasn't functioning at peak level, and so I was having to accommodate and be careful. And I came down to the dressing room after the second act, and I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize myself. I saw abject fear, and I thought, I don't think I can go on. I think I'm too frightened to go on. And then I heard what I thought was a recording of the Tabernacle Choir singing,
How Firm a Foundation.
How Firm a Foundation. And the part I heard them say was, fear not, I am with thee, oh, be not dismayed, for I am the God and will soon give thee aid. I'll strengthen thee, help thee, and cause thee to stand, upheld by my righteous omnipotent hand. I opened the door and I said, do you hear that? Hear what? It was that strong. And I hadn't invoked that. It was there at a moment of absolute terror. And I thought, he's here. He's with me. And it was so profound. So profound. And I made it through.
How does that happen 20 years into a wildly successful career? How do those nerves still find their way?
Well, I was not functioning at peak performance. If you're doing a play and you start to get laryngitic, and you clear your throat, your voice gets gravelly, but you keep going. For an operatic tenor, it's frightening that you've got that high C coming up. And if it's not there, the newspapers the next morning will tell everybody that you failed.
You're only as good as your last performance.
Yeah, and it's that kind of stress level. I don't know that there's any art form that the stress level can be as bad as a tenor in an opera. In a high visibility. I mean, if you're in a little small town and you're doing a community theater version of Tales of Hoffmann, okay. But when you know the New York Times are out there and the Philadelphia Post, and you know I've got to be perfect, and the spirit is willing, but the flesh has got some trouble, and I let it get to me, and I was not relying on him, but he reminded me that he was there, even though I didn't ask him to make himself manifest.
So you're coaching an aspiring professional now. How do you coach them to deal with those nerves?
There will always be butterflies flying around. That's adrenaline, but I have been able to teach those butterflies to fly in formation. I've learned to take that nervous energy and realize this is normal. This happens if you're running a 100-yard dash. Your respiration you start to get hot, you get cold hands, you start to sweat. These are all normal things that the human body does when it's being asked to do something very heroic, something beyond just sitting in a chair. So why are you letting it frighten you? Let it help you. Let those butterflies carry you through. I've usually been good at doing that. That particular night, I was not good at doing that. But most of the time, I can gain hold of myself and say, I'm prepared. I've put in the homework. I'm not just flying off the seat of my pants or whatever the expression is. I'm prepared for this. And I recognize these physiological sensations that I'm having. They're unpleasant, but God put them in here for a reason, and I'm going to let it give me energy. It's never daunted me to the point that I had stage fright and couldn't go on or anything like that.
I found that most people experience that at different levels all throughout their career. But most of them say that as soon as the buzzer sounds or the music begins or the show starts, they're able to snap out of it. But most of them credit preparation.
Yep.
If you're not prepared,
and many are not. Many are not, and they don't survive. You know, they think my natural talent is going to carry me through on this. My charisma is going to carry me through on it. My prayers started to change after I got sick. Instead of my telling God what I needed him to do for me, it was, let me touch someone tonight, someone who needs something that I can heal them. Let me be you speaking through me to someone out there. Someone out there needs something tonight. Let me find them. So I was putting not the stress on me doing everything perfectly, but my saying, I just want to be an instrument tonight.
Well, it takes the pressure off you, doesn't it?
It takes the pressure off you.
Oh, man. I love that. Where the only goal is to be an instrument in the hands of deity.
Right.
And for some reason, that takes the pressure off. In my mind, that's similar. And it's also more empowering.
Yes, it is.
You know, another area where an artist and a performer might feel that sense of nerves or a new sense of pressure is when they're about to take an artistic risk. For painters, I spoke with Thomas Blackshear, and for him it was changing genres completely, inventing a new genre, in fact, of art. And for some of the athletes I've studied, it was changing a part of their game where they're adding 3-point shooting to their game where they were usually great at cutting to the basket. It can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Can you recall moments in your career at any point where you took an artistic risk, we'll call it? And I'd love to hear of moments where it paid off really well and made a big impact, and times where it didn't pay off and what you learned from it.
Well, the biggest one was when I came home to die, and it was an infection in my skull, and the infection was coming down the back of my throat and was sort of cauterizing my vocal cords, so they were not functioning properly, and the cricoarytenoids, these little cartilaginous things that stretch the cords, were so swollen from the infection coming onto them, and it had literally pushed my hyoid bone, the little bone that your larynx hangs on. It had moved it off the two little tracks, so that when I would swallow, things would stop and then they'd move over and come down. And I needed to go to a physical therapist to let those muscles, retrain those muscles to go back the way they were. It took about 6 months.
Holy cow.
Every night at 10 o'clock, I would go to a physical therapist across the street. She'd watch MASH and she'd work on, and then she'd give me a glass of water, and I'd say, it's okay, just did it. She said, well, it'll go back tomorrow, but if we keep doing this long enough, it'll become. I started canceling all these performances because I knew I couldn't do them. A Faust in Chicago and a Bohème, I forget, but there was one opera I'd always wanted to sing, a role I'd always wanted to do, and I said to Val, I'm really regretting tomorrow I need to call them and tell them I'm just not able to do it. She said, no, don't call them. Do it. I said, but I can't sing, Val. She said, tell the Lord you need a miracle. And I said, but even if my voice comes back, this is Richard Strauss. This is like Wagner. This is stamina. I can't build the stamina by then. And she said, he knows that. Tell him you need a miracle and that you will go to the altar and ask for a miracle. I said, what do you mean by that? She said, learn the part in your head. You get on that airplane and you go and just tell him, I've done all I can do, God. Lord, I need you to make this happen. And I did. And I arrived, and the first rehearsal was what we call a Sitzprobe, where you have the entire orchestra and all the cast sitting in chairs so that they can show the intendant, the guy in charge, I deserve to be singing this part.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard my voice in 6 months. Wie schön ist die Prinzessin. I started singing, and there it was.
Wow.
It almost was non-recognizable. I know I'm doing that, but who's singing? Who is that? And it was there, and all of that stress went away, and it was going to the altar. I'm saying, I can't do this, Lord. I'm bringing everything to the fore, but I can't do it. I need you to help me do it. And he did. And I hearken back to that. That was nearly 40 years ago.
Wow.
And when those moments come that I think, I can't do this, I'm physically not capable of doing this, I say, but you just tell him. You put in the homework, and then you say, I need a miracle.
Did you have times where that wasn't the case? The artistic risk failed for one reason or another?
Yeah. I got cocky. At the end of Hoffman, the sustained high note, and I was cocky, and I thought, I'm going to hang on longer. I'm going to really, and it cracked.
It split at the end. Oh.
And I thought, you brought that on yourself. I saw it happen to Stanford Olson. When President Hinckley turned 90, he didn't want a birthday party, but he said, I'll have a concert in the new conference center. It had never been used before.
Yeah, this was the first time.
Very first time. And he asked me and Robert Peterson and...
It's Gladys Knight there.
Yes, and Gladys. And Stanford Olson, who was one of my former students, who did very, very well. And I was the first one out of the chute, and I was calm, even though the rehearsal had gone terribly badly, because the sound system didn't work.
That's right. That's right. Well, they told you they'd have it fixed by tomorrow. Don't worry. Brother.
How do you remember this?
Well, I did a little bit of homework.
Oh, my gosh. But I thought, okay, I'm singing this for President Hinckley, whom I love very much, and it's going to be okay. But then just as I was going out, they said, it's on high definition. We didn't know what high definition was. And he said, they're going to see every pore in a close-up. So whatever you do, don't sweat. And that's all I could think of as I started the song. Am I sweating? Am I sweating? But it all went okay, because I wasn't singing for me. I wasn't trying to show off. I just wanted to sing a nice song to President Hinckley and with my daughter.
Uh-huh.
Stanford, on the other hand, he was going to show off, and it backfired. Having taught him, I saw what he was doing.
Uh-huh.
He was pushing those high notes a little too long, a little too hard, and then he couldn't sing "Oh, Danny Boy," because he'd spent it all. You can be cocky. I think that was only once in my life, but I learned a lesson. Just do what you do, as you've rehearsed it, as you know you can do it. Don't try to do something heroic. Just do what you've programmed yourself to do.
Yeah. That was also counseled that it was your grandfather who wrote you midway through your career, and he talked about having the focus on the wrong thing and becoming a tinkling brass, as the scriptures say. Could you tell that story?
Yeah, that was tough. Things were going really, really well, and my grandpa wrote me every week, always on one sheet of paper, and always it began with the weather. Usually it was below zero.
From Cache Valley.
Yes, from Cache Valley. And he told me the weather, and usually told me bits of information. It was rather factual. Sometimes he'd talk about how he felt about something, but usually not. But this particular one was 2 pages. And the second page was a caution that the Lord had given me gifts like he gives everyone gifts, and I had magnified those gifts. But he feared that if I was not careful, my utilization of those gifts were going to become like sounding brass and tinkling cymbals, and I knew exactly what that meant. The Apostle Paul saying your life will become veneer, it'll be of no value, it'll still be there, but it'll be all show, it'll be no substance, and I was really angry. At first I was, I guess, hurt. I remember where I was. I was on the 104 bus coming down Broadway and looking at it. Did Grandpa really say that? He knows how hard I've worked. And
How old were you at the time?
26, 7, 8, 28 maybe.
Okay, so this is 4 years after graduation, but
I was there.
But it was a breakout success.
Yeah, it was. And then I got really angry that he could say such a thing to me. And that was terrible.
Well, you were doing what you had set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
You were doing it, and now you're being told, in a way, you need to bridle that.
And you need to come home.
It's probably natural to feel like, well, hello, what have we been doing this whole time?
Mm-hmm.
I am reaping the reward of my labor here.
And he watched me, and he supported me, and he knew the struggles and sacrifices but he was saying, be careful, you're on the edge. And I was on the edge.
He could see it.
I don't know if he saw it or he was inspired to tell me this, because we weren't constantly in touch or in proximity with each other. He was a very spiritual man, and I think the Lord knew I'd listen to him, and maybe I wasn't in tune enough that the Lord had to speak through somebody else, and that was my grandpa.
Yeah.
Because I respected my grandfather. He was very sound in his advice about everything, and I took great offense.
Can you think of another time in your life where you received feedback or counsel that was hard to hear or came very sharp? It could be like, from a loving family friend who was pulling you back, or maybe it was from a mentor who told you that you were terrible when you thought it was quite good, and but ultimately these lead to the building up of a better Michael.
Came from a bishop in Manhattan. We had some significant medical bills, and it was going to require... I determined that I would save everything I made. We would live on Laurie's salary, which was just to help us get through. And even though I was getting big fees, we were putting that all away, either investing it or saving it, because I thought this isn't going to last forever. My friends who were getting the same kinds of fees were spending it all, living very lavish existences and getting into very expensive real estate.
Was it a pretty nice fee at the time? Would it have been considered a lot of money?
It was a lot of money. I spent none of it. We made that decision that we would live just like college kids, and we would live on her salary, and everything that I made would be for later, because you never know how long that's going to last. And we had some significant... our insurance ran out for 2 days, and during that time, my daughter Vanessa, she was 2 years old, went into the hospital, and it was like $3,000. Well, that was a year's rent in that period of time. And I went to counsel with him, and he said to me, well, maybe you're just not doing what you're supposed to do. Maybe you need to get a more dependable job, get a real job. That was really hard to hear. It was hard to hear from my ecclesiastic leader, whom I thought would be in tune. What I was saying to him is that I'm trying to save this money. I have the money to pay those bills, but I'm trying to... And he told me, yeah, maybe you should get a job in a bank. that was a real ouch. I overcame it in time, but it was a really low blow. I've never told anybody that. I must feel really safe around you. But it was a real ouch.
Yeah.
Because he, of all people, should have known that this wasn't just a job. I never saw performing as a job. I just thought, this is what I'm supposed to do. And if it's what I'm supposed to do, somehow I will support my family.
He had no idea how lucrative it was.
No.
Or did he have an idea?
No. I told him that I would have to take money out of investments that I really felt needed to stay where they were.
Yeah.
And could he give me some advice? And his advice was, maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Nobody had ever said that. My dad, when I was in my first big production, he came to see it, and my voice teacher, he said, "Oh, this is incredible. This is incredible. But, he's putting so much time into this, he can't go out and get a job." And my teacher said to him, "Grant, let me sit down and talk to you. This is going to be his job. This is his job." Really? It must have been scary for a father to think he's going to support a family, getting up on the stage and singing. And she said, he's going to do very well. You just have to support him.
Yeah.
Don't try to talk him out of this, which he didn't. And but even my father, even though he saw I was succeeding and doing exactly what my dreams, he assumed that was just a hobby. I never saw it as a hobby. It was what I was supposed to do. And I knew that from the time I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
I knew I needed to spend my life on the stage singing stories. That was what I was meant to do. And I would do whatever it took to be able to do that, gain whatever skills I needed to gain to do that. Marry someone who, when I asked her to marry me, I said, "Can you live with an opera singer?" And I had told her what that would really mean. It would be really hard work. It would be extending. I don't know. I didn't say that. I was going to say, I said, it's going to be a gamble. I never saw it as a gamble. I thought, if I do what I'm supposed to do and he's going to help me, I'm going to do it and it will work.
Yeah. What else is generally misunderstood about creatives, singers and performers?
Well, that basic part of, you're going to starve to death. Never crossed my mind that I would starve to death. I just thought, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, it'll all work out.
You would think that they all say that to themselves, though.
I don't know. There's a lot of doubt. And a lot of people, young people come to me, and they're very, very talented, and they'll say, "But can I make a living at this?" You can make a very good living if you do the right things.
It's got to be a power law kind of a thing where a very few people make a tremendous amount, and then there's another tier where there's a good amount, but the bottom level is littered with good talent that it has to be their side thing because it can't fund their life.
I'm one of 4% of the members of the AGMA union, professional musicians, who have made a living exclusively performing. I've never had, I teach at Utah State, but the salary goes to the opera company. I was able to support my family just by performing, but I'm only one of 4%. That means the other 96% tried maybe as hard as I did and did not succeed, and had to end up doing something else.
It's the story that you see on every Instagram video of restaurants that are close to Disneyland where some of the waitresses and waiters will sing, and they have amazing voices. And you're like, why are they not performing somewhere? Well, there's always reasons, but there's a credible talent.
Oh, indeed.
But
I'm sure
there is a
there was
power law to it.
I'm sure there were a lot more talented people than I that did not succeed. I don't know what the ingredient is. Dependability is one of them. That one is oftentimes really gifted people, but they're not dependable. And it's an expensive industry. And if you don't show up for a rehearsal, it costs that company a great deal of money. I think that's a lot of it. I would never be unprepared. I would never embarrass anyone. My behavior would never be something the opera company that would haunt the opera company. Come back to them to say, do you know what your tenor just did?
Yeah.
I was very careful about that. Always trying to keep everything and deal with that tightrope walking of it's a very difficult moral line to walk. Sexual harassment, it's everywhere. And a lot of times parents would say to me, but what if they're propositioned by agents and so forth? I said, they're going to get that in working in a bank. It's not just the arts anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything. And walking that is a very fine line and not comfortable. Probably better today than it was when I was in the midst of it all.
You would hope it's better today.
I think with all the hashtag Me Too things and people getting in trouble for it, I think that's lessened from that direction.
Yeah. It's certainly a black mark on anywhere that it touches, any industry. I'm sure the arts have had more than their fair share of all
because
of this.
people are desperate to do it. I want to do this more than anything. I'll do anything.
Yeah.
And people in positions of power know that, knew that in that period of time, and took advantage of that. Desperate. I was never desperate about it. I knew it was going to happen. When I told my vocational guidance counselor that I was going to do it, I was going to do whatever it took to make it happen. I meant I will prepare in any way. I'll put all the hours in. I'll study, do everything I can. That was not part of that equation about doing anything. I meant I'll prepare. I'll do everything it takes to be prepared so that when that moment comes, I am prepared. If ye are prepared, ye shall not fear. That's probably why I experienced stage fright less than most people, because I was prepared.
That's right.
And I told my students and my colleagues, if you're prepared, there's no need to fear. There's a difference between being apprehensive and anxious and being frightened. When it turns to fear, that works really against you.
Yeah. Well, when you know what you want, the decisions are already made for you. The things that you'll say no to, as well as the things you'll say yes to.
Yep.
So you're now in a position where you control the culture and you control the flow at the Utah Festival Opera Company. You have the interesting experience now where instead of dealing with audiences and directors and producers from behind the stage, you're now meeting with boards and organizations and other interest groups that talk about funding and that talk about probably ways that they would prefer you to run things in your own company, right? How have you learned to navigate both the politics as well as relationships and turn this board presence into a positive to move the mission forward?
Sometimes I haven't been successful, but I made it very clear from the beginning, I'm not in charge. He's in charge. We opened every board member, every board meeting, every board activity with prayer. And I was very clear that I was making this decision because I had fasted on it, I had prayed upon it, and I have a sense of peace that this is the right move to make. And would you all support me in that? It was sort of the way the church operates. And for some people, that was objectionable and they didn't want to be a part of it. And for some of them, they tried to alter that. And in some times they were successful, to the point that I resigned twice because I thought, we got to play this way. When you do a spreadsheet, I don't know, what do you call it? Where you put who's in charge and who works.
An org chart.
Thank you. And I always put God up at the top, and I was not embarrassed to say that. And when the National Endowment for the Arts came out to examine us and to see if they would sanction us as a line item, really say these people know what they're doing, they sent an emissary out there, and he wanted to do that kind of flow chart, and he put my name at the top, and Billy Emmert, not a member of our church, she was the president's wife, the first lady at the university.
Yes.
She said, no, there's one above that. God. And the guy said, well, yeah, but she said, you got to put one more line up there because he looks to God for everything. Okay. And he wrote God up there. And that's how I have operated the company. And I ask people's ideas, but then I have to pray about it. I have to get this validation that this is right. And there have been some times when I couldn't do that, and it has backfired.
Mm. It's been your guiding star. Love it or hate it. That's how my organization is going to run. How cool that somebody not of your faith could still finish that sentence for you. That's another hallmark of great leaders is you communicate and you over-communicate so that your people can finish your sentence. They know what's going to fly and what's not going to fly. They know the core values and the beliefs of the leader of the company, because the founder of the organization is the guardian of the soul of that company. And as long as you're there, you are the guardian of that set of ideals and principles that you'll govern this company by. And the day that you step out, you have relinquished control to somebody else. That's why I love founder-led organizations have that unique identifier to them, because that soul of the company is being watched over by the one who it matters the most to. And I doubt, Michael, that anybody would be able to carry the torch in the way that you have. Anybody else at the helm, it would, by nature and by rule, it would have to change the character of the organization. So it's a hallmark of your leadership that they'll stand and they'll finish that sentence on your behalf because they know that's how this organization runs.
You said something extremely profound when you used the word leadership. I got my patriarchal blessing just before I was married. And one thing that the patriarch said that I thought, oh my gosh, he's so far off. I don't know that I can trust anything he just said, because he ended it by saying, your role is one of leadership. And I thought, that will never be my role. I never wanted to run for student body, anything. I didn't want any public, because I perceived that as being leadership. I'm going to run for president of the United States. And the fact that my patriarchal blessing tells me that my role in life is leadership, I've read it now for how many years and thought, what was he talking about? But you just answered it. I guess I have been a leader, but not the traditional kind of, okay, folks, I want your vote. This is what I'm going to do, and I want you to support me in that.
Yeah.
But I have guided people to think like I think. I've tried to hire people who thought, not replicated everything that I think, but that they see that I'm going to operate this company by looking for miracles.
They can catch the vision.
And if they can't, they haven't been able to stay with us.
Well, leadership is influence. John Maxwell teaches that. he said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And if nobody's following you and you call yourself a leader, well, you're just taking a walk. But as you're influencing and impacting an organization, that is the core identifier of leadership.
I guess that has been my role of late for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't before that.
Well, you've done something amazing, and we've wanted to talk about this, where you talked about Larry Miller, and he said every kid needs to see this excellence. 300 people that work on stage, off stage, in the orchestra pit. There's artists, there's composers. Opera is singing, it's dancing, it's acting, it's musical, it's emotion. There's the drama, there's the appreciation of the effort that goes in. Not to mention that it creates jobs. It employs 300 people. That's amazing in its own right. So Larry's dream that he never saw to fruition was that every school child in the state of Utah gets a free ticket to the opera. And that is something that your influence and leadership has brought to pass. Can you tell me more about that?
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. I'm not aware of any other company anywhere, certainly not in the state of Utah, that says you can come and see anything free. Not once. If you want to come 10 times, you're welcome 10 times. And you can sit in that expensive seat as my guest. The State Office of Education has bought into that, and they help us. They subsidize some of that ticket. But I would do it even if they didn't. That would please Larry so much. It troubles Gail a little bit. She said, but you got to balance the budget. And I said, Gail, even though it doesn't make economic sense, I think we'll be okay. I think somehow it'll balance the scale. And it has. I wish more students would come.
It's anybody that is K through 12.
Yep. And even in homeschooling as well.
Where do they go to find the ticket?
Online. Go to our website and, yeah.
Utah Festival Opera.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it could be a whole classroom. It's meaningful to me. I hope we can continue to do it, that the resources will be there to make it feasible to continue to do that.
It's one of the most underrated things in the Valley by far. I remember I'm old enough that there was this was not a thing when I was growing up. However, I remember going to the Music Man that my parents took me to, and that was my first experience at the Ellen Eccles Theatre. And I loved that. And I remember the next year they took me to Annie, Get Your Gun. And we've been back for repeat performances, and I've been for operas as well as other performances that they've put on. And the impact that that's had on my life has been great. And it's been something that it didn't strike me as a kid that it was awe-inspiring and it changed my life. But what it did was it gave me an important building block on the foundation of what I was learning and what I was seeing. And as I've grown, I've developed a deeper appreciation for that. And I realized that I didn't need the lightning bolt moment of revelation and inspiration. That's come later in my life, but I don't think it would have been as profound had I not been exposed to that at a young age, had an appreciation for it, and learned to kind of take my 7-year-old attention span and draw it out across this amazing musical. And I remember getting lost in the story and being surprised that it had ended so quickly. But it's something to this day that is an important part of my life. We were in London and we would go to the West End, and we just got back from a company trip to Rome, and we made time for the opera there. And the Phantom of the Opera is touring the nation right now, and so we'll see that in about 6 weeks from now. And whenever there's other shows that come into town, the summer opera is really fun to look through the catalog and kind of plan what you want to go and see. But all of that stemmed from a 7-year-old Dallin sitting in the nosebleed, so to say, watching The Music Man.
And your parents sacrificed to take you there.
It was definitely a sacrifice.
It was an investment in you.
Yeah. And it really was. And I'm grateful for that. My dad's an artist. He's a painter. I've grown up around art, specifically oil paintings.
Uh-huh.
But I'm grateful for my parents putting that into my life, and I have you to thank ultimately for making that happen. It's been a wonderful thing in my life, and I look forward to taking my kids to it and bringing that into their life. I have 3 boys. Hopefully there'll be some more kids along the way, but I believe what you believe on this, Michael. It matters. And it is a core piece of our culture and who we are as human beings. And it's a core piece of what it means to be a part of this great nation and in this amazing community. All the way 600 years of opera history, 150 years of the greatest classics that we all listen to. And it comes to this small agricultural town. That to me that's impact that's a mission greater than just oneself. I want to ask you this final question, Michael, and I ask this to all of my guests, and it's this. What's the kindest thing anyone's done for you?
That's an important word to me, kind. I've told Laurie the nicest thing you could put on my headstone is he was kind. My dad, you've probably heard me tell that story. When I was in high school, and he took me to Chicago for a very important meeting with his hero. His name was Willard Simmons. He was the president of the National Pharmaceutical Association. My dad was on the president's council, President Kennedy's council, to try to stem drug abuse that was coming down the road. Boy, they had no idea what was really going to happen. And my mother was going to go with him, but for some reason she determined not to go, and he asked me to go. I'd never really spent time with my father. My father, like Larry Miller, was very astute businessman and worked from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, Monday through Saturday. And on Sunday he was in the bishopric, so I didn't even see him on Sunday. So I didn't really know him until late in high school when I started working with him in his pharmacy, which was a wonderful way to get to know him. But on the way there, he told me what his schedule was. We were going to be there, I think, 3 nights. And he said, we'll do anything you want to do. And being a selfish teenager, I didn't think about the fact that Wrigley Field was there. And he loved baseball, basketball, football. I should have said, well, you mean we're going to go to Wrigley Field? I said, can we go to a play? And he said, sure. And I said, can we go to a musical? Dad liked musicals. I said, can we go to an opera? A what? Okay, we can. And he said, you go buy the tickets. I'll be occupied in the morning. He gave me his wallet and said, go and buy the tickets. And so I spared no expense. And when he came home the first night, and I had all the tickets laying out on one of the beds, and I was so proud of what I had been able to amass as our itinerary. We were going to see Colleen Dewhurst and Jason Robards in Eugene O'Neill's The Moon and the Misbegotten. And he said, okay, we're going to go see Your Good Man Charlie Brown. It's brand new. We're going to go to the Chicago Symphony. We're going to hear an evening of Mozart. We're going to hear an evening of Wagner. But the most important pair of tickets was one to see The Man of La Mancha. It was brand new. I knew nothing about it except that it was a big hit in New York. And that was on Thursday night. And 2 aisle seats on the 3rd row. And he said, oh, this sounds great. Let's see, Thursday night might be a little bit of a tight squeeze because we're having dinner with Willard Simmons the night of Mount of La Mancha. And he said, we're having dinner at 6:30. I see that curtain isn't till 8. 2 hours is plenty of time to have a meal. Yeah. The kind of meals I was used to having, 2 minutes was sufficient. But this was not a meal. This was a pageant. And Mr. Simmons was holding court with all these other members of the committee in this exquisite millionaires club with cutlery out so far you had to ask the guy next to you to pass it in, ketchup in sterling silver, one course after the other. One course was some things floating in butter that my mother and I had been killing in the garden for years. And there they were. And I watched the clock, 7 o'clock, 7:15, 7:30, and I knew we weren't halfway through the meal because nothing that looked like a main course had been delivered. And my dad was just hanging on every word Mr. Simmons said. And I thought, what do I do? Should I say, Dad, or should I just let him have his moment? And I thought, this is his moment. I need to let him have it. And at 7:45, he stood up and said, Mr. Simmons, this has been one of the greatest nights of my life, but I have a more important engagement with my son. Now, I thought I was a great disappointment to my dad. He never said so, but he was a great athlete, and I was not. He was highly coordinated, and I was not. I was not anything that I figured my dad wanted as his firstborn son. And yet, he was saying, I have a more important engagement with my son. And we went out and got in the cab, and I was glad it was dark because the tears were coming, and I didn't want him to see that because I thought it wasn't good for teenage boys to get teary-eyed. He should have seen those tears so that I could have told him what I was thinking. And we got to the theater and got to our seat just as the lights were coming down. And then at the end of Act 1, when Jose Ferrer stood on that staff and sang The Impossible Dream, I had an impossible dream. Statistically, it was impossible. Statistically, a kid from River Heights, Utah, singing on the stage of the Met, it's statistically impossible. But my dad believed in me, and he loved me not in spite of who I was, but because of who I was. He loved me for all of it, and he was willing to forego that important moment in his life so he could give me an evening at the theater. I can't think of anything as kind as that in my life. And that was a huge turning point in my life with my dad, whom I didn't know at all. But that said everything. That he wasn't disappointed in me. That's kindness. To give an opportunity to someone at the expense of your having a tremendous one yourself.
One of the greatest expressions of love. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful experience.
It was. And it brings the tears just like it happened yesterday. I hope I have been able to do that for my children and my grandchildren, because it's crucial that they know that. They need to know that you love them because of who they are.
If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast on Instagram at the handle Momentum Theory Pod, where I'll be announcing new episodes weekly, as well as sharing my top takeaways from every conversation. As always, I invite you to please share this episode with anyone you think could benefit from the conversation. So long for now, and thank you for tuning in.